Most of Week 1 is in the books, and it started back on Thursday night with the game between the Cowboys and Eagles. I thought Dak Prescott played a great game on the road in Week 1 against the defending champions, and I know the box score wasn't great for Prescott, but he made several big-time throws, and one of the takeaways I have for Dak in Week 1 is that he looked a lot better in Week 1 of 2025 than he did at any point last year. The CeeDee Lamb drops were obviously unfortunate, but there were multiple tweets about CeeDee Lamb being the only one at the facility on Friday, the day after the game, catching passes from the Jugs machine, and I think that is a good sign from a leader on the team. I also thought Dallas played a lot better than what I thought they were going to play, and yes, there was meat left on the bone, but this is going to be a lot more difficult of a team to beat this year than we initially thought. For Philly, a win is a win, especially on banner night and especially with how their night started, with the ejection of Jalen Carter due to him spitting on quarterback Dak Prescott. Positively for the Birds, I thought Jahad Campbell played really well, and Zach Bond, at least based off of this game, was definitely not a one-year fluke. It was offensive coordinator Kevin Patullo's first game, so I think the offense will be a bit of a work in progress, but again, a win is a win. And the Birds didn't look the best in the first few games of 2024, yet became one of the best teams ever. And another positive for Philly was Jake Elliott nailing a 58-yard field goal. Chiefs-Chargers in Brazil is up, and one of the biggest things I want to hammer home in today's video is it's just one game. Super Bowls are not won or lost in Week 1. However, I think there are concerns to be noted, and one that applies for the Chiefs based on this game is their run game. Kareem Hunt and Isaiah Pacheco are not an explosive duo, and unfortunately within this game, Xavier Worthy was also hurt. I worry about this team offensively, and even when Rashee Rice comes back from suspension, he's not a legit wide receiver 1, meaning he's not a top 5 or 7 receiver in the NFL, and I think those concerns, along with how Jawan Taylor played in this game, are warranted. Now, the defense played bad in this game, and we'll dive more into this in a later video, but what I want to emphasize is it took a 318-yard, 3-touchdown performance from Justin Herbert to beat this team by 6 points, along with a huge 19-yard run on 3rd and 14 to prevent Kansas City from getting the ball back. So while they did lose and there are concerns, I don't think it's the end of the world, and I also thought all things considered, Patrick Mahomes played pretty good in this game. Now, for the Chargers, this was a huge Week 1 win. Joe Alt pitched a shutout moving back to the left side, and Justin Herbert had one of the best games of his career. We all know what happened in the playoff game last year with the Chargers, and specifically how Justin Herbert played, but this was a Herbert masterclass. He made every throw required and became the 3rd quarterback in franchise history to have a 300-plus yard, 3 passing touchdown game in Week 1, joining Dan Fouts and Phillip Rivers. I also thought Greg Roman called a tremendous game for the Chargers, and this was a hell of a response for this team based on the last football game we saw them play. The Cardinals traveled from the desert to the Big Easy and opened their season with a 20-13 win. The season wouldn't have been over if Arizona lost this game, but this was a game they needed to win. They've done a lot of right things as a franchise over the past few years, and starting out on the right foot against an inferior team was critical. Marvin Harrison Jr. looked good in this game, and so did second-round rookie Will Johnson, who I do believe will be one of the biggest steals from the 2025 draft. They only put up 3 points in the second half, and I would have liked to have seen more of a step-on-the-throat mentality, but a win is a win, and that's the biggest thing. Also, pass catchers not named Marvin Harrison Jr. and Trey McBride combined for 10 receptions for 31 yards, which is obviously not going to be sustainable over a 17-game season. For the Saints, this is expected to be a rebuilding year, but I still thought there were a lot of positives to take away. I thought Spencer Rattler looked decent in this game, and for a team that was largely dismissed prior to the season, I thought they played the way they're going to for most of the year. A team that won't quit, and one that is certainly not a pushover the way the national media wants to make them out to be. They're going to run the football, and they're not going to be an easy team to beat, and the biggest thing they have to do is clean up penalties, which is something that can be worked on. I also thought Kellen Moore could have handled the clock management better at the end of the first half, but there were still a lot of positive things to take away for the Saints. High Expectations is the name of the game for the 2025 Commanders, as they went to the NFC Championship game last year and they started the following year with a win. The Commanders ran for over 200 yards as a team, and Bill Krosky-Merritt looked good in his NFL debut. I know Washington won by 15 points, but this game didn't feel that close throughout. Expectations this year are not exactly going to be fair for Jaden Daniels based on the year he had last year, but he played fine in this game. They also had 12 penalties as a team, and in the first few games of the year, you're generally going to have a lot of things to clean up, and this was no exception. There were a lot of ups and downs within this game and a lot of early season miscues that are very fixable. Now, for the Giants, I walked away from this game with a lot of concerns. This was the third straight year they opened up with a double-digit loss and scored no touchdowns. 2023 was a 40-0 loss to the Cowboys, 2024 was a 28-6 loss to the Vikings, and 2025 was a 21-6 loss to the Commanders. There was a point in this game where the Giants had a first and goal from the 1, and Russell Wilson threw a pass to fifth-round rookie, you guessed it, offensive lineman Marcus Bowe from Purdue. Malik Neighbors was visibly frustrated, and you can't blame him within this game. This was a very poor game from the Giants, and in a lot of ways, it's a copy-paste from the last few years. I don't want to overreact, but this was a genuinely bad game for the Giants, outside of a few plays from Abdul Carter blocking a punt and Malik Neighbors making a few plays himself. To Foxborough for Raiders Patriots, and my two biggest takeaways for the Raiders are that they finally have a competent coaching staff, and Geno Smith looked really good when he had time. There were a few plays where he was set up to fail, but this was a good road win for a team that had to travel a long way, and for a team that couldn't establish the run either. The difference between seeing Jimmy G, Gardner Minshew, and Aiden O'Connell to a healthy Geno Smith was night and day, and the Raiders are going to be a problem. They're not going to roll over, they're not going to back down, and they are going to be a handful each and every Sunday, and they're going to be an extremely difficult team to beat. Now for New England, I'll be honest, I was underwhelmed for a few reasons. I was underwhelmed with the run game, and I was also underwhelmed with the receivers outside of Kayshon Boutte, and credit where it's due to Kayshon Boutte. Drake May also didn't look great in this game, and it's only one game, so obviously the season isn't over, but I thought May missed a lot of passes high, and it looked like there were times where he was hesitant to throw the football. I also didn't see the grit and grind and passion and fight you see from a Mike Vrabel team either. I was a little disappointed with the Patriots punting the ball down 10 with 4 minutes to play, and I hope we see a different, more energetic team next week. The Bucs escaped the Big A with a division win over the Falcons as they won 23-20. Tampa was down several players entering this game, and escaping with a road division win in Week 1 is huge. I love Emeka Egbuka and thought he was a really good prospect coming out of Ohio State, and he finished his NFL debut with a 4 for 67 and 2 stat line, and good for him. He is the real deal. Not surprisingly, with guys out along the offensive line, Tampa struggled to run the ball, but the biggest thing is they're 1-0. And I do believe whenever a Hall of Fame talent in Tristan Wirfs returns, well, believe it or not, they will improve the run game too. But I cannot emphasize how big of a win this was for Tampa. Now for Atlanta, Michael Penix played good, and in a lot of ways I thought he did enough to win, but unfortunately he was let down. Caleb McGarry is out for the year, and not that he single-handedly destroyed their chances of having a successful run game, but Atlanta not being able to run the ball and help out their young quarterback showed in a big way. Younghoe Koo also had a down 2024 and unfortunately missed a chance to send this game to overtime in Week 1. And ultimately for the Falcons, my biggest takeaway was that Michael Penix played good, but unfortunately was let down by his team. To the state of Ohio we go to discuss Bengals-Browns, and the biggest thing Bengals fans did after this game, aside from enjoying a bowl of Skyline chili, was breathe a huge sigh of relief. Everyone knows about the early season Bengals struggles, and for a minute it looked like this was going to be much of the same. Cleveland outgained Cincy by over 185 yards, and there was a point in the second half where Joe Burrow was 2 for 8 for 15 yards, and the Bengals had a drive where Joe Burrow was sacked 3 straight times. If there has ever been a Merriam-Webster definition of a win is a win, then this game is pictured directly next to it. The Browns are a tough matchup for the Bengals, and this game showed why. Now, for Cleveland, this was a very difficult game to lose. They held the Bengals to under 10 yards in the second half. They had 3 drives with double-digit plays that ended in points, and they lost. Jerry Jeudy had a few drops, the defense had a few dropped interceptions, and it was one of the most unfortunate and ugly losses you'll see over the course of the 2025 season. And to make matters worse, their kicker missed a field goal and an extra point in a game they lost by 1. My take of the Browns being a thorn in team sides this year rather than a flat-out bad team stands, but if we are being honest, this was a game they should have won that they unfortunately didn't. An offensive explosion happened at MetLife Stadium in Week 1 as the Steelers beat the Jets 34-32. Offensively for the Steelers, this was as textbook of a start as you could have hoped for Aaron Rodgers. Rodgers threw for 244 yards and 4 touchdowns, and Calvin Austin legitimately looked like a good number 2 receiver. Now, I do have questions for the Steelers' offensive line, as I think Steelers fans would agree that Aaron Rodgers was battered around a lot more than they would have hoped for in his Steelers debut. They also couldn't establish the run, but like we said with the division rival Bengals, a win is a win. The defense did not look like a typical Pittsburgh Steelers defense, at least not in the season opener, but a huge shout out goes to Jalen Ramsey and Chris Boswell. Now, for the Jets, Justin Fields looked good and so did Breece Hall. I titled the 2025 Jets season preview, "These are not the same old New York Jets," and I think you saw that in week 1. This is not a team that's going to back down and roll over. They're going to be a nuisance to play, and my only negative takeaway is one that I had entering the year, and it's that Brandon Stevens was a complete liability in Baltimore, and he was not good in this game and will not get the job done when it comes hell or high water. But I thought there were a lot of good things to take away for the Jets, despite the end result. Panthers-Jags is up, and I'll be honest, this was my biggest fear for the Panthers in week 1. Playing a team that has really good edge rushers without their starting left tackle, and a team who just traded Bryce Young's safety blanket in Adam Thielen. There were a lot of negatives in this game for Carolina, but their third-year quarterback, who is in a now-or-never year, is where the light is going to be shined brightest, fair or not. Bryce Young did not look comfortable really at any point in this game, and Xavier Legette, who was a first-round pick last year, was not great either. Carolina plays Arizona next week, and I don't think it's going to get better based on their defensive line and how that will impact Bryce Young. I thought Jacksonville was going to win, but this result was a lot worse than what I was expecting for Carolina. Liam Cohen is now the first head coach in franchise history to win their first game, and Jacksonville looked dominant. And what I think is crazy about this game is, yes, there was meat left on the bone, but to any Jags fans, you just won a game by 16 points, and we know it could have been 20 points, where Travis Hunter and Brian Thomas Jr. combined for 7 catches for 44 yards. While you didn't get the flashy plays you wanted from the number 2 overall pick that you know you will get later in the year, you know what you did receive though? A double-digit victory and a 1-0 start, and that's a really good trade-off for something that we know that will happen quite a bit, meaning the flashy plays from Travis Hunter throughout the 2025 season. Dolphins-Colts is up, and I don't think this is an exaggeration to say this was one of the worst games we've seen from the Dolphins in several years. The other big one that comes to mind is when they lost in the 2019 season opener to the Ravens in what was the start of Lamar Jackson's first MVP campaign. Daniel Jones was dicing this defense time and time again, and he looked like a really good quarterback that Miami didn't have an answer to. And what makes matters worse was everyone knew how bad this secondary was heading into the year, and Daniel Jones isn't close to the best quarterback Miami is going to face this year. Tua Tagovailoa also played a pretty bad game, and this was a big test based off of where this team was last year. There were reports of players being late and a bad culture, and this game showed exactly that. If there is any overreaction from week 1, it's truly how bad this team looked. For Indy, this was as dream of a scenario as possible in week 1. It couldn't have went better. Daniel Jones looked good, they ran for over 150 yards as a team, they had over 400 yards of offense, and they won the turnover battle. I'm not getting into this team's ceiling or anything like that because we're going to have to see it on a more consistent basis, but this was a dream week 1 for the Colts, who had not had a win in week 1 in over a decade, and good for them, and RIP Jim Irsay. The 49ers won in the Emerald City with a score of 17-13, and one of my biggest takeaways for the 49ers in week 1 is Bob Saleh is back. And Robert Saleh had this defense looking good all throughout the game and held the Seahawks to just 230 yards of total offense and forced multiple turnovers too. Nick Bosa is Nick Bosa, and if you would have asked any 49ers fan with the game on the line if Nick Bosa can make a play that'll determine whether you're 1-0 or not, well, they'd take that chance every single time. Brock Purdy can clean up the interceptions, but the biggest thing is this team is off on the right foot. And for Seattle, I was a little disappointed with the play calling. There was a lot of screens, and Sam Darnold wasn't utilized to the player that he can be. He's really good off play action, and they didn't use a lot of play action within this game, and he had that one really good throw in a bucket to Jackson Smith-Njigba late in the game, but the player Darnold was last year was not used enough in this game. Seattle also didn't take advantage of 2 missed field goals and 2 Brock Purdy interceptions, and I'll be honest, I was pretty disappointed with how the Seahawks played in week 1 from the top down. Texans-Rams is up, and my biggest concern with the Texans entering this year unfortunately showed in week 1, and that was the offensive line. They couldn't consistently run the football, and they also had 11 penalties too. And not only that, but I was also disappointed with the lack of getting Nico Collins involved. Nico is undoubtedly one of the best players in the NFL, and he finished this game with 5 targets. And anytime you hold a Sean McVay team to 14 points in their stadium, well, I think you should come out with a win. And I can't help but think this was a missed opportunity opportunity for the Texans. If there's any positives to take away, the defense is good and these mistakes are fixable. Now, for the Rams, this is a win that should be a confidence booster. There's a very real possibility we saw the winner of each division in this game, and Nate Landman had one of the most timely plays you'll ever see, followed by a huge play to none other than Puka Nacua. I love the Rams going for the win on third down late in the game, and big-time players make big-time plays in big-time games. Obviously, you'd like to see more from the run game moving forward and the offense in general outside of Puka Nacua, but this was a game between two playoff-caliber teams, and it was a good team win for the LA Rams. The Broncos defeated the Titans 20-12, and I'll be honest, I'll keep this pretty short here. I am very frustrated with the Tennessee Titans and their coaching staff just one game into the season. I'm concerned with where this franchise is headed, mainly because this team was abysmal in 2024 at beating themselves, whether it be due to penalties or awful special teams play. I was hoping they could go into Denver and be presentable and keep it close against a really good defense in their #1 overall pick's debut. The positives was they forced 4 turnovers. The negatives was they only scored 12 points despite forcing 4 turnovers. They had 131 yards in penalties and they had 133 yards of total offense. The last sack specifically of Cam Ward was bad, but it should have never came down to that. And I really worry about the future of this coaching staff because of how undisciplined this team is. I'm not calling for Brian Callahan's job right this second, but this is definitely something to keep an eye on, and I would be shocked if I don't eventually get to that point, mainly because a lot of these problems are self-inflicted. For Denver, the defense was as advertised. The offense was not good, and whenever a second-year quarterback has a bad game, you immediately think sophomore slump, fair or not. I do think Bo Nix will be fine, but obviously he had a pretty bad week 1. Coaching in this game was also not great for the Broncos, and I don't understand going for it on 4th and 8 at the end, but look, the Broncos are 1-0, and they are a full game ahead of the Kansas City Chiefs in the AFC West. The Green Bay Packers started out the 2025 season with a statement win as they beat the Lions 27-13, and this game is a perfect example to show the impact Micah Parsons has on every play. He is a problem, and we often talk about how pressures mean a lot, even though they're not sacks, and the red zone interception in the second quarter was a perfect example. I still think Green Bay wins, but going into the half up 17-3 instead of 17-10 is a huge difference, and I think one of the biggest takeaways from week 1 was just how fast this defense played against an extremely talented offense. I know Ben Johnson isn't the Lions' offensive coordinator anymore, but it's not like he took everyone's powers with him and Jahmyr Gibbs is now an average NFL player. This defense is going to be a problem for Green Bay, and they are one of the best teams in the NFC. For the Lions, obviously this loss stings, but there's going to be a transition period with losing both coordinators. But I do think it was a shock as to how poor this offense played at times. It was 27-6 with 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter as they scored a touchdown with 1 minute to play, but this was very uninspiring week 1 performance from the Lions. They're not done, obviously, but I was stunned to see how much the Packers controlled this game on both sides of the football, and to put it kindly, this did not look like a Dan Campbell coached football team. And the biggest thing for the Lions moving forward is, how will they respond when they're knocked down the way they were in week 1? I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please like the video and subscribe, as there will be tons of NFL content this fall that I think you'll enjoy as well. And until next time, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.